Imaginarium Theater has finally released. At last, after 3 long years of wait, we have a new endgame mode in Genshin Impact. But is it any good? Today, I aim to run over my immediate first impressions of the new game mode, give my thoughts on differing aspects of the game mode, and most importantly, see whether it's actually any fun or not. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. This is what I was anticipating the most with Imaginarium Theater. Genshin trials aren't that good in my opinion, because you get such a minimal amount of time with the character. Not only that, but their energy is inflated, and you're given a pretty mediocre team and build to work with. Now, Imaginarium teams are funky as all heck, but you do get the opportunity to test characters more thoroughly with this game mode, and if you strategize, you can end up playing competent teams. But because you're usually fighting trash mobs, your team comp doesn't even have to be that good to clear the stage anyway. So, while these testing grounds still aren't completely ideal, they're better than what we usually get. It's a nice way to test out the hottest new picks, or characters that maybe talk of a town in a bit more of a long-form setting. And that's another thing. Because the enemies that you fight are so weak, yes, your regular builds do end up feeling overkill, which is a shame, but they are at least handicapped by the fact that you're forced to play absolutely abominable team comps. Constellations apply in Theater as well, so for whale players, you're gonna feel yourself outscaling the difficulty even worse than before compared to Abyss. This setup is a free-to-play friendly dream, and does negate you having to build tons of characters that you may not even have. Theater is also significantly easier than the Abyss, which has consistently been rising in difficulty for every patch, which makes sense because a majority of Fontaine units, such as Noivy and Arla, lifted up the power scale so much. Abyss needs to keep up with this new strength. So new players will be able to access all of the rewards pretty easily, especially when you can add a whale and use their C6 friend characters, for example. Part of me wonders if Abyss's rising difficulty is part of why they're having our Abyss resets and trying to push Theater. So on the whole, their builds are honestly fine, and are enough to get the job done when it comes to scaling with the content at hand. They're great for playing around more with characters that you don't have, and it's cool that featured characters have additional buffs for that given season. I think they're a positive part of this game mode, since it means that people who only have 2 teams built aren't immediately forced to collect and build nearly every random character in the game, while still having benefits in having the game mode be significantly easier if you go and build your own units and have them reach their max potential. Team building in Imaginarium it's something alright. 90% of the time, you're gonna be using absolute nonsense. I think there's fun to be had there, and the game mode will urge you to play all those characters that you may have benched long ago due to getting an upgrade. For example, C0 Raiden Hyper is a team that was power crept DPS-wise a long time ago, but in Imaginarium Theater, you need more electros than just the one, so having a flexible DPS like her is pretty useful. You need more than one of each element anyway, so all those characters you've built over the months or years, depending on how long you've been playing, will finally see some viable use. I'm pretty happy about this as a very big Venti enjoyer, since he's not only finally gonna see a reason for people to use him again, but he's also gonna excel in this game mode considering how many trash mobs there are. Other AoE titans like Xiao were really strong in my experience playing this. On the whole, while there are bosses in this game mode, AoE favored characters will really enjoy themselves here. I'd say that the way it is structured does test your team building knowledge a solid bit, since you have to know what would work even in a restricted, rough scenario, though once again, the mobs are scaled adequately to the bricked teams you may end up playing. The main team building skill of Imaginarium Theater is looking at a group of weird characters and trying to make the least bad team. Yes, that is the equivalent of making the quote-unquote best team possible, but the sentiment is different overall. The following question is presented. How well can you build a team under such handicapped circumstances? This is where any semblance of difficulty within this game mode lies, because to be honest, it is really easy, especially compared to the Abyss, so I'm gonna say go ham. Yes, your character builds being good will help you clear faster, but don't sweat it too much. And the bar to entry for Imaginarium Theater is not that high from my initial impressions, but I will make a follow-up video soon covering specific tips that may make your experience playing with jagged teams a little better. I will say that if you strategize correctly and manage to pull together a good team, then the already not so difficult game mode becomes even damn easier. This is pretty disappointing for those of us who actually want a challenge, because Endgame is supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be a test of the characters that we have spent months on end building. So I will say that Imaginarium Theater seriously favors the newer player experience. As it stands, I don't think having insane builds on every unit is really necessary for this game mode, so I'd say yes, while building a DPS of every element will be pretty nice, you can also just go ahead and pick up some random 4-star characters and build them up. They'll clear the game mode just fine, since Imaginarium Theater is not hard enough to justify pulling entire 5-star characters for, especially since featured promoted characters will most likely be a part of the main trial unit's cast anyway. And the most important thing of all when it comes to a video game, is it actually fun? Honestly, in my opinion, yeah, I enjoyed it, but it's really short. In my experience, none of my pyro or electro characters have crazy investment, maybe a 5-star weapon at best, and my animals are pretty well built, but no crazy cons aside from C2 Xianyun and a really good C1R1 Xiao. And I used a friend of mine's C5R1 Raiden. The whole experience took me around 10 minutes. I was sort of hoping for something longer, because we've been waiting 3 years for a new, fresh endgame mode. Yes, this is something different indeed, and while the experience of having to conjure teams out of thin air isn't a fun experience for everyone, it is something I quite enjoy as somebody who owns many characters and builds. I have a specific rule on my account to never artifact share or weapon share. I pulled 2 separate Staff of Homas for this exact reason. I literally refuse to share. Sharing is not caring on my account. So for somebody like me, with everything well organized, a continuous Imaginarium run was quite fun. I can imagine this being a lot more frustrating for someone whose account is all over the place and their builds and artifacts are constantly being swapped from place to place, or to somebody who may own the characters at hand, but have them underleveled or underbuilt. But it would have been nice to have a little more of it. I think this is only really gonna be a problem for more hardcore players like me that are really dedicated to Genshin Impact and were wanting something that we could really sink our teeth into. I mean, hey, Honkai Star Rail recently came out with Apocalyptic Shadow, a game mode which is even harder than their Spiral Abyss equivalent, MOC, and requires high game knowledge and usage of powerful builds. Something similar for us would have been nice. Casuals, or even older players who are tired of having to slog through the Abyss for 30 to 40 minutes every reset, may appreciate that this game mode is so much more straightforward and quick. You get your rewards after 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 20 at worst, and then you dip. It's a big time save, and less Abyss may refresh the palette for these players, making them more enthusiastic to take on the Abyss when the next cycle lands. But for us hardcores, kinda sucks that we don't have an Apocalyptic Shadow equivalent where our good builds seriously matter. You could argue that Imaginarium is supposed to be the pure fiction equivalent, but it honestly feels more like Simulated Universe to me. I didn't really bother with any fancy buffs while playing, and managed to get through it just fine. I think my opinion on how fun it was really is as simple as, it wasn't boring, but it wasn't insanely fun either. I was mostly propelled to continue on by my own curiosity regarding how the game mode worked. Needless to say, since it's so short, I don't think I'll replay it that much in the future, unless it's with specific intent. Most of my testing is going to continue being within the Spiral Abyss. It is a breath of fresh air, and that I enjoy, but this game mode seriously feels like it was designed more around player convenience, which once again is not a terrible thing, but sadly it doesn't cater to everyone, especially the hardcores. I can already hear the comments singing, but juice, the majority of the player base is not hardcore. They're catering to their most popular audience. This I understand, but it's still weird to me, as Endgame is usually specifically made to keep core players fed and happy. Not to bring up Star Rail again, but they mastered this pretty well with Simulated Universe being the more casual and accessible game mode, with MOC, Pure Fiction, and Apocalyptic Shadow being the more hardcore end of the spectrum. This is not me trying to say, Honkai Star Rail good, Genshin bad, by the way. I'm just trying to draw up the point I'm trying to make by comparing to a different game Hoyoverse has made to prove that they understand this kind of design philosophy, and they just choose not to employ it for Genshin. So while on the whole I enjoy Imaginarium Theater, it's not like there's much to enjoy. It's an absurdly short game mode that's honestly just a fun seasonal gimmick that will make building random 4 stars and using old outdated 5 stars more relevant again, which is pretty neat. It further pushes the sentiment of build who you like, which is close to being lost with the rising difficulty of the Spiral Abyss. I'd say it's a best of both worlds situation, since we get more monthly rewards on the whole of the setup, about 1 to 2 more pulls and 2 Abyss resets per month, and the Abyss is still available to us if we want to test out our characters. But now, featured units have the small Imaginarium buffs on top, which is pretty neat. Though it does incentivize playing Abyss less for players who only want to play it for the rewards. I think that a super easy, convenient game mode like this is fine on its own, but I do hope that eventually they do add the really difficult, more years-long player endgame that the core dedicated fanbase really wants. I think part of the reason why I'm so chill about theater compared to my friends who feel very negatively about it is because I had low expectations to begin with, and pretty much it met those low expectations, with the only surprise being how short it was. Another thing I want to quickly throw in there that I really like is the photo mode pose upgrades. You just know that I'm waiting impatiently for them to release the Furina and Venti ones, which I'm gonna buy up instantly. I like using the photo mode for videos, as my regulars all know, and also just in general for cool shots, so I'm part of the random minority that's overly hyped about this. Let me know if you're also interested in this by any chance. For the time being, I'm gonna enjoy Raiden's one, since it looks the sickest out of the currently available. So, at the end of the day, my first impressions are as follows. Decent game mode, a bit too short, team building is wacky, which I enjoy, though that's not good for everyone. Though I wish the difficulty was a little higher, especially because it is quote-unquote endgame. Us years-long players with a huge roster will easily outscale this content, though it is an absolute godsend for newer players who want to yield out the rewards more easily, and I'm happy that it's made more irrelevant characters usable again. Other than that, kinda hope we get something harder in the future. Yeah, I get that my C6 Furina is destined to outscale literally everything, but when even weaker trial characters can clear with ease, that's when you know we really need a harder game mode to play. Hopefully this video was able to give you a solid first impression on the new Imaginarium Theater game mode. This has been Juice, signing out, and honestly the best thing about Imaginarium Theater is this little dude.